Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're going to do a deep dive into how mindfulness can actually, change our brains.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating stuff. It
Right.
is. We're talking about rewiring those neural pathways.
Literally rewiring, right?
Exactly.
We're diving into an amazing lecture by Dr. Kelly McGonigal.
Oh, she's brilliant.
She is. She's a mindfulness expert from Stanford University.
Stanford, yeah, they're doing some incredible research on this.
Yeah, and the big takeaway here is
Drumroll.
our brains can actually operate in a calmer, more present way.
Like an alternative mode.
And mindfulness just might be the key.
It challenges that old idea that we're stuck with the brain we're born with.
Totally. So Dr. McGonigal starts by talking about our brain's default setting.
Our factory setting, so to speak.
And it's not always a pretty picture.
Yep.
Our brains, it seems, naturally lean towards stress and overthinking.
Always looking for problems, even when there aren't any.
Right. Have you ever noticed that? Your mind just spins out even when everything is fine.
Oh, all the time. It's like our brains are hardwired for survival mode.
Like we're still running from saber-toothed tigers.
Exactly. Neuroscientists have a name for this. The default mode network.
Catchy.
It kicks in when we get lost in our thoughts.
Alright.
Self-criticism, that kind of thing.
It's interesting because Dr. McGonigal points out this isn't just a scientific concept.
It's not.
It connects with ancient wisdom traditions, too.
Yeah, like Buddhism and Taoism.
Both science and spirituality seem to be saying the same thing.
We create our own suffering by trying to escape the present moment.
Getting caught up in those mental loops.
Exactly. So the question is there a different way? Can we train our brains to be less reactive?
Less reactive.
Less on edge.
And that's where mindfulness comes in.
The hero of our story.
Dr. McGonigal talks about the experiencing self. It's a state where we're fully present.
And way less reactive to our thoughts and emotions.
Like we're stepping out of that default mode.
Precisely. And how do we access this state? Through mindfulness training.
So it's not about emptying your mind.
No, that's a common misconception.
It's more about choosing something to focus on.
Like your breath sensations in the body.
And then gently guiding your mind back when it wanders.
Because it will wander.
I will.
Our minds are like curious puppies, always sniffing out distractions.
That's a great analogy.
And what's fascinating is that Dr. McGonigal's research shows that people who don't meditate, they struggle to access this experiencing self.
Their brains just automatically jump into commentary and time travel.
Like they're stuck on autopilot.
But here's the truly mind-blowing part. Mindfulness training can actually rewire our brains.
Like physically change the structure of our brains.
Wait, for real?
You heard that right.
The physical structure changes.
Yep.
Wow.
Areas associated with attention, sensory processing, and emotion regulation, they actually become thicker with consistent mindfulness practice.
So more neuronal connections.
More connections, more pathways.
It's like building new highways in the brain.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, so with consistent practice, our brains become better at paying attention, processing our senses, and regulating our emotions.
Exactly.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So it's not just about feeling calm in the moment. It's about creating lasting changes in how our brains actually function.
Absolutely. And these changes have a ripple effect on our overall well-being.
Which makes sense, right? Because our brain is kind of running the show.
It's the control center.
Dr. McGonigal specifically delves into how mindfulness can impact mental health conditions, like depression and anxiety.
Yeah, that's where it gets really interesting.
Let's talk about that. We know mindfulness can change the brain, but what does that look like in practice?
Well, there's compelling research showing that even just 8 weeks of mindfulness training can reduce symptoms of both depression and anxiety.
8 weeks? That's really encouraging, especially for someone who's new to this.
And what's interesting is that mindfulness doesn't necessarily make the sadness or anxiety disappear completely.
So it's not a magic erasure.
It's more about changing our relationship to those emotions.
Can you give us an example?
Sure. There's this study where researchers found that participants who practiced mindfulness were less reactive to sadness. They still felt the sadness, but they weren't getting lost in the negative story their minds were creating around it.
So they could acknowledge the feeling without letting it take over.
Exactly. It's not about denying or suppressing difficult emotions, but learning to experience them without getting completely swept away.
It's about creating some space.
Space to breathe.
Space to choose how we respond.
Precisely.
It seems like mindfulness offers a way to step back from our automatic reactions.
To press pause.
Create some distance between our thoughts and our responses.
Yes. And this is particularly helpful for dealing with things like social anxiety.
Oh yeah, that inner critic can be brutal.
Totally. People with social anxiety often struggle with intense self-criticism.
I'm awkward, everyone's judging me, that kind of thing.
That's the one. And that inner critic, it's often fueled by the default mode network going into overdrive.
So mindfulness can help quiet that voice.
That's the idea.
How does that work? Does it make people less self-critical?
That's exactly what the research suggests. There was this study where participants with social anxiety went through mindfulness training. And afterwards, they were better able to face those negative self-beliefs without being completely hijacked by them.
So they could acknowledge the thoughts without spiraling into self-doubt and anxiety.
Exactly. It's a great example of how mindfulness helps us shift away from the default mode's tendency to get stuck in negativity. And it's not just limited to anxiety and depression either. Dr. McGonigal talks about how mindfulness can be helpful for people struggling with addiction.
Like substance abuse. How does that work?
Well, it turns out the default mode network is also a major player in cravings and relapse.
Really?
Yeah, mindfulness helps individuals become more aware of those cravings, creating a space between the urge and the action.
So instead of being controlled by the craving, they have a choice.
Exactly. It's about empowering individuals to make conscious decisions rather than being driven by automatic reactions.
That's powerful. It sounds like mindfulness could be a valuable tool for breaking free from all sorts of ingrained patterns, not just addiction.
Absolutely. It's not a magic cure, but it can be incredibly helpful for cultivating greater self-awareness and self-regulation.
It's about taking back the reins.
Exactly. And it's not just about our mental and emotional well-being either. There's growing evidence that mindfulness can actually improve physical health, too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, studies have shown it can help lower blood pressure, reduce chronic pain, and even boost the immune system.
Wait, so in addition to feeling better mentally and emotionally, mindfulness might actually make us physically healthier as well.
It seems that way. And I think it makes sense when you consider that mindfulness is all about bringing our attention to the present moment, which includes paying attention to our bodies.
Right, so we're not just training our minds, but also becoming more attuned to our bodies and what they're telling us.
Precisely. And when we're more aware of our bodies, we're more likely to notice subtle signs of stress, discomfort, or illness.
Which can help us take better care of ourselves overall.
Exactly. It's like we're developing a deeper understanding of our internal landscape, both physically and mentally.
You mentioned earlier that Dr. McGonigal discussed mindfulness as a tool for trauma recovery.
Yeah, that's a powerful application.
Trauma can leave people feeling trapped in the past.
Stuck in those painful memories.
How can mindfulness help in those situations?
It can help people connect with the present moment, offering a sense of safety and grounding.
So instead of being overwhelmed by the past, they can start to rebuild their lives in the present.
It's not about erasing the past, but rather learning to relate to it differently. Mindfulness can be a source of support in that process.
This whole conversation is making me think about how mindfulness isn't just a trendy concept.
Or a buzzword,
It's more like a way of life.
a way of being.
It's about cultivating a deeper connection with ourselves, with others, and with the world around us.
I love that.
This deep dive has been so eye-opening. I feel like I've gained a whole new understanding of how mindfulness works, not just theoretically, but neurologically as well.
The brain science behind it is incredible.
It's incredible to think we can actually rewire our brains to be less reactive, more present.
It speaks to the incredible plasticity of the human brain.
So for someone brand new to all this, what's the most important takeaway from Dr. McGonigal's lecture?
That's a great question. If I had to sum it up in one sentence, it would be this. Suffering is a part of life, but we don't have to amplify it by getting lost in our thoughts. If I had to sum it up in one sentence, it would be this. Mindfulness offers a way to step out of that cycle of reactivity and connect with a deeper sense of peace and well-being.
It's not about avoiding difficult emotions or experiences,
No.
but learning to relate to them in a more skillful, compassionate way.
Exactly. Mindfulness helps us create space around those thoughts and emotions so we can observe them without judgment, allowing them to arise and pass without sweeping us away.
Like creating a buffer zone between our thoughts and our reactions,
Yes.
which gives us more freedom to choose how we respond.
That sense of choice is incredibly empowering.
It's becoming clear that mindfulness isn't just about feeling calmer.
It's so much more than that.
It's about cultivating a deeper connection
Connection with ourselves,
with the world around us.
waking up to the richness of our experience.
So if changing our relationship to our experiences is the key to suffering less, where might our listeners start applying mindfulness in their own lives?
That's a great question to reflect on. Perhaps they could begin by simply noticing moments throughout the day when they feel a sense of peace, joy, or connection.
Hmm, that's interesting.
What are they doing in those moments? Where are they? Who are they with?
Paying attention to those moments of peace.
Exactly.
It's such a simple starting point, but it could reveal so much about what truly nourishes us.
And from there, we can make more conscious choices that align with those values, creating a life that is more fulfilling and meaningful.
This has been such a thought-provoking deep dive.
It really has.
I'm feeling inspired to deepen my own mindfulness practice.
Me too.
Thank you for joining us on this fascinating journey into the world of mindfulness and the brain.
It's been a pleasure exploring this with you.
And to our listeners, remember, you have the power within you to change your mind and ultimately change your experience.
You absolutely do.
Until next time, keep practicing and exploring the incredible potential of mindfulness.
We'll see you then.
So we've been exploring how mindfulness can actually reshape our brains and how those changes can impact our mental and emotional well-being. But Dr. McGonigal takes it a step further, suggesting it can even impact our physical health.
Yeah, there's actually a growing body of research that shows the physical benefits of mindfulness practices. Studies have shown it can help lower blood pressure, reduce chronic pain, and even strengthen the immune system.
That's pretty amazing. So how does that work? How does mindfulness impact our physical health?
Well, remember, mindfulness is all about bringing our attention to the present moment, and that includes paying attention to our physical sensations. And this heightened awareness, this tuning into our bodies, can be really key.
So we're not just training our minds, we're training our awareness of our bodies as well.
Exactly. When we're more attuned to our bodies, we're more likely to notice those subtle signs of stress, discomfort, or maybe even the early stages of illness. And that awareness can help us to take better care of ourselves and make healthier choices overall.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like we're developing a more intimate understanding of our internal landscape, both mentally and physically.
Precisely. And that deeper understanding can empower us to make positive changes in our lives. Dr. McGonigal also talks about how mindfulness can be a really powerful tool for people who are recovering from trauma.
Yeah, that's something I wanted to touch on. Trauma can be so debilitating, often leaving people feeling trapped in the past. How can mindfulness help in those situations?
It can be incredibly helpful. You see, trauma can often keep people stuck, reliving those painful memories and experiences. But mindfulness can help to ground them in the present moment, offering a sense of safety and stability.
So instead of being overwhelmed by the past, they can start to rebuild their lives in the present moment.
Yeah, it's not about erasing or forgetting the past, but rather learning to relate to it in a different way. Mindfulness can provide tools to help people process those experiences without being completely consumed by them.
It sounds like mindfulness offers a path to healing and moving forward without being defined by past trauma.
That's the power of mindfulness. It helps us to create that space between ourselves and our experiences, allowing us to respond rather than just react.
It's interesting how Dr. McGonigal connects mindfulness not just to individual well-being, but to its potential impact on our relationships and communities as well.
Yes, absolutely. When we practice mindfulness, the benefits extend outwards. We become more present and attentive in our interactions with others.
So it's not just an inward journey of self-discovery, it can also transform how we connect with the people around us.
Exactly. When we're less caught up in our own thoughts and anxieties, we have more capacity for empathy and compassion. We're more likely to really listen to others and respond with kindness and understanding.
It makes sense that this would lead to stronger, more fulfilling relationships.
It absolutely does. Mindfulness helps us communicate more effectively and navigate conflict with more grace and composure. Imagine approaching disagreements not from a place of defensiveness, but with a genuine desire to understand the other person's perspective.
That shift in mindset could be incredibly powerful, not just in personal relationships, but in professional settings as well.
I completely agree. It's something we could all benefit from, learning to approach challenging situations with greater clarity and presence.
This has been such a fascinating deep dive. We've covered so much ground, and I feel like I have a much deeper appreciation for the multifaceted nature of mindfulness. But for someone who's completely new to this, it can feel a bit overwhelming. Where would you suggest they begin?
It's true, there's a lot to unpack. But the beauty of mindfulness is that you can start simply. You don't need any special equipment or years of training to reap the benefits. It's all about finding what works best for you and integrating it into your life in a way that feels sustainable.
So what are some practical first steps?
I always recommend starting with simple practices like mindful breathing, mindful walking, or mindful eating. These are great ways to bring your attention to the present moment and cultivate a sense of awareness without feeling overwhelmed.
Those sound very accessible. What about more formal practices like meditation?
Meditation is a wonderful way to deepen your practice and really explore the transformative power of mindfulness. There are many different types of meditation, so it's worth experimenting and finding one that resonates with you.
Do you have any recommendations for resources that might be helpful for beginners?
Absolutely. There are tons of apps, books, and online resources available these days. Apps like Headspace and Calm are quite popular, and you can find plenty of guided meditations for free on YouTube. It's really about finding what fits your individual learning style.
It sounds like there are a lot of options out there.
And remember, it's not about striving for perfection or trying to achieve some mystical state. It's about showing up with curiosity and kindness, even if it's just for a few minutes each day.
Consistency over intensity, that's a great reminder.
Exactly. And trust me, the more you practice, the more you'll start to notice those subtle yet profound shifts in your daily life. It can be a truly transformative experience.
This conversation has been so insightful. Dr. McGonigal clearly presents a compelling case for the power of mindfulness. But before we wrap up, I'm curious, what final thought would you leave our listeners with? What's the key takeaway you hope they'll remember?
I want listeners to understand that mindfulness is not a luxury. It's a necessity in today's world. It's a gift you can give yourself, a way to reconnect with your inner peace, navigate life's challenges with more grace, and cultivate a deeper sense of joy and meaning in every moment.
That's beautifully said. It reminds me of something Dr. McGonigal said about mindfulness not being about achieving a specific state of mind, but rather cultivating a particular quality of attention.
Yes, precisely. It's not about emptying your mind or forcing yourself to feel a certain way. It's about approaching your experience with a gentle, curious awareness, moment by moment.
And that awareness, it seems, can ripple out into all areas of our lives, impacting our mental, emotional, and even physical well-being.
Absolutely. Mindfulness is a journey of self-discovery and transformation that's available to everyone. We just need to take that first step.
Well, this has been a truly illuminating deep dive. I feel inspired to deepen my own mindfulness practice.
Me too. It's a lifelong journey of learning and growth.
Thank you for joining us on this exploration of mindfulness and the brain. Until next time, remember to breathe, be present, and embrace the power of mindfulness in your own life.
You know, it's really fascinating how mindfulness can be applied to so many different areas of life.
Yeah, the applications are vast.
We talked about anxiety, depression, even addiction.
Trauma.
But Dr. McGonigal also mentions that mindfulness can be helpful for people dealing with chronic pain.
Right.
Now, that seems a bit counterintuitive
It does, doesn't it?
because you would think, wouldn't you, that if you're focusing on your body, you're going to feel the pain more intensely.
You'd think so.
But that's not actually how it works, is it?
No, it's not about trying to eliminate the pain. It's more about changing our relationship to it.
So not ignoring it or pretending it's not there,
Yep, that's right.
but like shifting how we experience it. So
Exactly.
you explain that a little bit more.
Sure. So think of it this way. When we experience pain, our body sends a signal to the brain,
Okay.
but then our thoughts and emotions can actually amplify that signal. So it's not just the physical sensation.
Right. Our minds can create a whole story around the pain.
Fear, worry, frustration.
Exactly. And all of that just adds another layer of suffering on top of the